An Australian businessman says he wants to ensure Papua New Guinean landowners have the financial tools to save their forests. Rod Holden has been working with landowners representative Robert Mukoi in Middle Ramu in Madang province to try and arrive at a sustainable development model. Don Wiseman has more.
Robert Mukoi is striving to bring basic services to his region without destroying the surrounding rainforest. But he fears it will come down to letting the loggers in, because they're the only ones taking an interest in the resource. I asked him just what he's looking for.
I would like to see a road connection into the area, cutting across the 49,000 hectares. Then we could have access to basic government services, so we could easily have access to them. Right now, we don't have any road connection to the outside. When we have sick people, they walk or they are carried to the nearest road link. That's the river or the road. So we actually need a road connection to the outside world.
And having the forestry company come in, they would build a road and so on and so on.
Yes, because the government obviously cannot do it.
The alternatives are what? You've talked about natural capital, the natural capital that you have. Another means of convincing the world to help out developing countries. If they want the forest saved, it's going to cost, essentially. Someone somewhere, organisations somewhere have got to somehow contribute or provide the income that would otherwise be provided by the logging company.
Yes. We know that there are donor agencies and there are funds out there in the world, and they've been talking about preserving the jungle for the good of mankind, because as we see, the world is dying slowly. We, the people in the jungle, living under those trees, we know what's happening, but we have needs also. What you have there in the outside world, we also have those needs. And we know that our government cannot provide this, so the alternative is to sell our trees to whoever can come and get it. At the same time, they should be able to give us basic infrastructures like aid posts for health services, schools, law and order. We have so many killings, so many rapes, fighting, so many things happening in the jungle belt because there is no road. How can we access? How can the government send in police or law and order to help? So the only way that we see that we can have access to these services is through logging.
The logging company, of course, is not going to be building these things. So what is going to allow all of these facilities to be built? Is the government going to step in with the money it earns? Is this your thinking?
I believe there are mechanisms in place in the FMA. The government will be collecting levies off those trees that are harvested. They'll be collecting tukina for health. They'll be collecting tukina for education, things like that. This money is stored in a trust account with the PNG Forest Authority. And when we need those money to build the infrastructures within the project area, we will apply for it and get it. But obviously in other areas, this doesn't happen. The landowners themselves tend to use that money to enrich themselves. So this is what I'm working to avoid in my area.
And you have talked about a new forest economy, and within that is this reference to natural capital. So how do you see this working?
I already have registered 91 ILGs. Those clans will have to accept this new forest economy concept where the developers behind this program will go into the village and start counting everything from the flora and fauna to the trees and plants, everything, so that we will know how much we are conserving, how much we are preserving, so that the developers behind this, they will have to give us what we need in order to survive. Instead of cutting down the trees, we preserve those and we are getting paid for that. That's the idea. But we have to have people at the back funding and supporting this to preserve those things in the forest.
Sustainability is the aim of Rod Holden. He has a business called Kuragaya, which aims to foster the development of environmental impact investments for institutional investors. He says they aim to deliver exponential systems change, which will achieve true global sustainability. Mr. Holden introduced Robert Mukoi to the concept of natural capital, which he says is essentially nature and something that could well provide the resources needed to build schools, hospitals and roads.
I said to Robert on the conversation, well, there's another alternative that's coming, and that's around natural capital. And so I explained natural capital accounting and the SIA framework that's come out of the UN. It was launched in March 21, and that's gradually going global. It's sort of designed to sit alongside the system of national accounts that spits out GDP numbers, but also factor in externalities, so the true cost of using our natural resources actually gets borne by the companies rather than society, and to probably a lesser extent, factoring in the drawdown of natural resources. You know, a country like Australia is a quarry, and we mine everything and we send it overseas, and that is going to run out sooner or later. So we need to take a long-term view of natural capital, which essentially is nature. We've got 6 different forms of capital in the world, like human capital, financial capital, intellectual capital. All of it is based on natural capital. So unless we can come up with a model that means that this long-term stewardship of natural capital must be the first principle of all human endeavour for us to have a truly sustainable planet.
In terms of Robert and his community, getting their schools, their hospital clinics, their roads, how does that become something that is going to work for him?
So essentially there is value in, if you look at it from a logging point of view, there's value in a tree standing in the forest, and a forester looks at that tree as far as the value of it cut down and sawn into timber and sold into a market. So there's already a value of that tree standing there, let alone the value of that tree and what it does for producing oxygen and filtering water and all the rest of it as part of a forest. So there's inherent value in natural capital as stands. So we, as a company, develop investment products based on that, the value of that tree standing there.
They could then borrow against that value.
Well, no, it's not a debt instrument. It's a financial instrument we sell into an OTC marketplace, which is an over-the-counter marketplace that provides revenue, and that revenue, a big chunk of that revenue goes back into the local community so that they can use that to build their own schools and hospitals and roads and infrastructure, etc.